The Tyrrhic homeworld, a lush planet of towering spires and verdant valleys, had never known war. In fact, the very concept of conflict was foreign to its people. The Tyrrhic had spent centuries cultivating a society based on peace, balance, and deep intellectual pursuit. Their culture prized knowledge and diplomacy over strength, and their militaries were little more than ceremonial symbols of unity. So when the message from the Galactic Council arrived, informing them that a delegation of humans was to visit, fear spread like wildfire. The humans were known throughout the galaxy, but not for their diplomacy. They were known as the Deathworlders, creatures from a planet so dangerous that only the strongest, most adaptable survived. The Tyrrhic had long avoided human contact, preferring to focus on their peaceful dealings with other races, but the Council's decision to assign humanity to the Tyrrhic as ambassadors left them no choice. They would have to face their fear and negotiate with the beings who had earned a reputation for surviving conditions that would obliterate most other species. As the human vessel, a massive, sleek ship that gleamed under the light of the planet's twin suns, touched down on the Tyrrhic capital, Elder Ivek stood at the front of the council chamber with his closest advisors. The delegation's arrival was an event the Tyrrhic had prepared for meticulously, though there was no training that could truly prepare them for this moment. Avik had read all the reports on humanity, their brutal history, their rise from the ashes of war and violence, their survival against the odds on a world teeming with deadly creatures and unstable ecosystems. The Tyrrhic were used to peace, used to order and calm. But humans, they were survivors. Survivors of chaos, of predators, of environments that could tear a weaker species apart. To the Tyrrhic, humanity's very existence was a threat they could not fully understand. The thought of a Deathworlder walking into their world, with their hardened eyes and unpredictable nature, was enough to send waves of discomfort through even the most seasoned diplomats. As the doors to the council chamber opened, revealing the human delegation, Captain Jake McAllister and his team, the Tyrrhic could feel the weight of the moment. Every step they took felt like a test, not just of diplomacy, but of survival. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The tension in the Grand Council chamber was palpable. The Tyrrhic had gathered in their finest robes, their long, slender forms shimmering with delicate patterns of bioluminescence. They had spent years perfecting their art of negotiation, carefully crafting every word, every gesture to ensure the utmost courtesy. But as Captain Jake McAllister and his crew stepped into the room, the carefully orchestrated environment of Tyrrhic diplomacy seemed to falter. McAllister was a seasoned officer, not a diplomat by nature, but the pressure of this moment weighed heavily on him. His uniform, dark, imposing, with the emblem of Earth's United Nations prominently displayed, was a stark contrast to the elegant, serene forms of the Tyrrhic. He stood with his arms clasped behind his back, every inch the professional soldier, but there was no mistaking the humanity behind his eyes. "We come in peace," McAllister said, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of warmth. His words, while meant to reassure, hung in the air like a challenge. To the Tyrrhic, the very fact that these humans had travelled to their homeworld at all was unsettling. The Tyrrhic had never met a race like this, one so raw, so alive with dangerous potential. They looked at McAllister's team, each human more imposing than the last, and saw the shadows of warriors, not diplomats. Avek, the eldest of the Tyrrhic Council members, cleared his throat. He was a tall figure, his skin shimmering a soft green under the chamber's artificial lighting, his many eyes watching the humans with an almost inscrutable expression. "We are honoured by your presence, Captain McAllister, but we must express our concern. You are creatures of survival, yes. It is known across the galaxy that your world is one of extreme dangers. McAllister nodded, understanding that fear was at the heart of the Turrek's reservations. Yes, our world is dangerous, but that is why we've learned to adapt, to survive. We've come here not to impose, but to offer friendship. The words sounded simple, even sincere, but there was an undercurrent of doubt in the Turrek's eyes. The human's reputation had preceded them, and the fear was impossible to shake. Avek raised his hand, signaling to his advisors. Your offer is noted, Captain, but your presence here is unsettling. How do we know you come with peaceful intentions? McAllister knew this was the first test. The Turek weren't asking for proof of peacefulness. They were asking for proof of humanity's control over the chaos that was so deeply embedded in their nature. The next few hours of conversation would be critical. We're here to show you, McAllister said, his voice firm, that humanity's strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to survive and to build. We will prove it to you, if you'll allow us. The words hung heavy in the air. There was no turning back now. The atmosphere in the Turek Council chamber remained tense, a fine line of unease stretching between the two species. The humans had spent the last few hours explaining their mission, outlining the peace-building initiatives they hoped to pursue with the Turek. But despite McAllister's calm assurances, the skepticism was undeniable. The Turek leaders were not convinced that humanity's intentions were purely peaceful. So McAllister made an offer. We understand your concerns, he said, his voice steady. Perhaps the best way to prove our commitment is by showing you. We have a world, well, a moon. Actually, that might change your perspective. It's dangerous, hostile, far more dangerous than anything you've encountered. But it's also where humanity has learned to live and thrive. We invite you to come with us and see for yourselves. Avek, his luminous eyes narrowed, exchanged glances with his fellow counselors. You wish us to visit a death world. This moon you speak of. Where is this place, and why would we? The moon's name is Antera, McAllister interrupted. It's one of our outer colonies. It's got toxic air, constant electrical storms, and wildlife that would tear most species apart in seconds. It's not a place for the faint of heart, but we've adapted, we've survived, and we've learned to live in harmony with it, rather than fight against it. There was a long pause, the Turek contemplating his words, the weight of them sinking into the air. Finally, Avek spoke, his voice laced with reluctance. You wish us to trust you by subjecting ourselves to this madness. Why should we believe that you will show us the truth? McAllister's lips twitched into a small, confident smile. Because we have nothing to hide. Humanity is a species that learns. We take our survival seriously, but we also take cooperation seriously. We want to show you that we're not just a threat. We're allies. After a moment of silence, Avek nodded stiffly. Very well, Captain McAllister. We will go to this Antera. But know this. If we find that you have lied, if this is a trap, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves. McAllister nodded in agreement. Understood. I'll have my team prepare. Later, as the delegation boarded the human shuttle for Antera, McAllister could feel the weight of the challenge ahead. This wasn't just about proving humanity's strength. It was about showing the Turek that survival wasn't about domination. It was about adaptability, resilience, and the willingness to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Antera awaited. The shuttle descended into Antera's toxic atmosphere, the sky outside lit up by streaks of violent lightning. McAllister and the Turek delegation were strapped in, the shaking of the shuttle almost drowned out by the roar of thunder outside. Through the small portholes, the Turek could see flashes of the moon's jagged terrain, covered in craters and rocky outcrops, with no sign of civilization for miles. The planet's surface was constantly bombarded by fierce electrical storms, and its thick clouds blocked out most of the sunlight, casting the landscape in a perpetual twilight. The Turek were on edge, their elongated eyes wide with nervous anticipation. The air outside was thick with toxic fumes, a deadly combination of methane, ammonia, and sulfur. The thought of breathing it in made them uneasy, but the humans didn't seem to care. They were preparing the protective gear and equipment, talking amongst themselves as if they were preparing for a routine mission. The shuttle's engines roared as it touched down, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. McAllister unstrapped first, motioning for the Turek to follow. The hatch opened, and a gust of acrid wind hit them like a slap in the face. The smell was unbearable, and the Turek recoiled instinctively, their delicate nostrils flaring. McAllister, however, stepped out without hesitation, pulling on his respirator. "This is Antera," McAllister said, his voice muffled through his helmet. "It may look inhospitable, but we've managed to carve out a life here. We've learned to respect the dangers rather than fight them." Ivik hesitated, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. He stepped down from the shuttle, struggling to adjust to the thick atmosphere. The air burned his throat, and he coughed reflexively. The landscape stretched out before him. A barren, alien world of blackened rocks, twisted metal wreckage from long-forgotten expeditions, and deep, rifted valleys where lightning still crackled in the distance. This is madness," Ivek murmured, almost to himself. "How do you survive this?" McAllister didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the nearby ridge, where human workers were already setting up a temporary base camp. "We don't just survive, Elder. We thrive. But we've learned that survival here isn't about brute force. It's about adaptation, patience, and understanding our environment." The Turek delegation looked out at the moon's hostile, jagged landscape. The enormity of the challenge ahead was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just a test of humanity's strength, it was a test of their very philosophy. The Turek had always believed in peace, in the idea that nature itself could be tamed through calm and thoughtful management. But here, in this savage place, the very concept of control seemed fragile, even laughable. As they followed McAllister to the camp, the storm raged above them, and the true danger of Antera made itself known. A flash of lightning struck nearby, sending a jolt through the ground, shaking the air with the deafening crash of thunder. The Turek froze, looking at the humans as they calmly adjusted their equipment, unfazed by the chaos around them. In that moment, Ivik realized that he wasn't just witnessing a world of death. He was witnessing humanity's ability to face it without flinching. And perhaps, for the first time, he began to wonder if there was more to these Deathworlders than he had been led to believe. The storm intensified as McAllister led the Turek delegation toward the human base camp. The skies above darkened, and the air grew heavier with the static charge from the raging electrical discharges. Antera's atmosphere, already toxic and corrosive, now seemed determined to strip away anything that dared to exist in its shadow. The winds picked up, swirling dirt and debris, and lightning cracked across the sky, lighting up the landscape in sudden, blinding flashes. Just as the group reached the makeshift shelter, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The Turek staggered, trying to maintain their balance on the uneven, jagged rocks. McAllister's team moved quickly, securing the equipment they had set up. The humans were prepared. This wasn't their first storm. But the Turek were not accustomed to this kind of chaos. and their fear was palpable. As the team hustled inside the reinforced shelter, the violent storm outside grew worse. A screeching roar of wind filled the air, and a massive bolt of lightning struck a nearby ridge. The resulting shockwaves sent a shock of static through the air, sparking the electronics and briefly plunging them into darkness. A scream broke the silence. Cilia, one of the younger Turek diplomats, had stumbled as the ground quaked beneath her. She was caught by a falling beam of debris from the structure, knocking her unconscious. The humans acted without hesitation. McAllister immediately dashed forward, crouching beside her with practiced ease. His crew moved swiftly, securing the area and ensuring that no more debris would fall. "Medic." McAllister called out, his voice calm but urgent. In seconds, Dr. Amelia Hayes, the chief medical officer of McAllister's crew, was kneeling next to Cilia, her medical kit in hand. The Tyrrek delegate was unconscious, her bioluminescent skin flickering weakly, evidence of internal injury from the impact. "We need to stabilize her now," Dr. Hayes said, already working with remarkable speed. She administered a sedative to ease Cilia's pain, then began patching up the cuts and bruises. Ivik stood frozen in shock, his many eyes darting between the humans and Cilia. He had never seen such swift action, such precision. In Tyrrek culture, medical attention was an art, calm, methodical, based on long, careful study. But this was something different. The humans moved with an urgency he had never witnessed before, as if lives depended on their quickness. Once Cilia was stabilized and her vital signs were steady, Dr. Hayes helped her to a makeshift cot, still murmuring reassuring words to keep her at ease. The storm continued its relentless assault on the planet's surface, but the shelter held firm. The Tyrrek delegation stood in stunned silence, watching as the humans worked together with skill and grace. Ivik turned to McAllister, his tone softening. Your people, you risked your lives for her. You are not what we thought you were." McAllister gave a small, wry smile. "We don't leave anyone behind, not even in a storm like this." The words settled heavily in the air, and for the first time, Ivik began to understand. The humans didn't just survive in the harshest environments. They cared for one another in ways that transcended survival. They protected their own, no matter the cost. And for all their rough edges and chaotic past, there was a bond in humanity that the Tyrrek had never truly seen before. Later, as the storm began to subside, and the storm's furious crackling turned to a distant rumble, Ivik sat down beside McAllister, his mind swirling with new thoughts. "Perhaps there is something more to you, Captain. Perhaps we have underestimated your people." McAllister nodded slowly. "You've only seen a part of it, Elder. But I promise you, there's more we're willing to share." The seeds of trust were beginning to take root, even in the unforgiving ground of Antera. And in the harshest of environments, humanity's greatest strength, its ability to adapt, to care, and to survive, was beginning to win over the Tyrrek. The storm had passed, but the air still crackled with energy, the oppressive weight of Antera's hostile atmosphere lingering like an unwelcome guest. The Tyrrek delegation sat in the makeshift shelter, watching the humans work as they continued to reinforce the camp. McAllister's team was calm, efficient, and determined. They repaired the damaged equipment, maintained their gear, and managed the harsh environment with a quiet confidence that seemed to permeate every action. Ivik and his advisors watched in stunned silence, the earlier tension between the two species now replaced with a sense of quiet contemplation. The humans, despite their rugged survivalist reputation, weren't the reckless, chaotic predators that Tyrrek had feared. There was a method to their madness, an uncanny ability to navigate and thrive in worlds that were hostile to all but the most adaptable. After the storm subsided, McAllister gathered the Turek around the central fire pit of the shelter, his face bathed in the warm glow of the fire's flickering light. "We've done everything we can to keep you safe," he began, his voice steady. "But Antera is a harsh world. It can't be tamed, not by force, and not by technology alone. It's about understanding the environment, working with it, not against it. That's how we've survived here." Ivek nodded slowly, his luminous eyes reflecting the flames. "We've heard your words, Captain. But we are a people who build, who shape our world with careful hands. You say it is not brute force, but what you are suggesting, it is still dangerous. To live like this, in constant danger." McAllister looked around at his crew, then back at the Turek. "We don't have to live in constant danger, Elder. We've learned to respect it, and we've learned to live with it. But that doesn't mean we're alone in this. That's where you come in." The words hung in the air for a moment, and then McAllister continued, his voice quieter now. "We've studied your systems, your ways. You've mastered environmental sustainability, peace building and resource management in ways that we haven't. We could learn a lot from you, and in turn, we can show you how to survive on worlds like this, not just to endure, but to thrive." Ivek's brow furrowed as he considered the offer. The Turek had never been forced to think in such terms, but the idea of using their peaceful methods to complement humanity's survival expertise was not without merit. It was a partnership, not of domination, but of collaboration. "You offer us something different," Ivek said at last. "We are peacekeepers, not warriors. But perhaps there is room for both." McAllister's lips curled into a small smile. "Exactly. Peace can be the strongest force, but it has to be backed by the will to protect it." The Turek's hesitation was still there, lingering beneath the surface, but Ivek was beginning to see the truth in McAllister's words. Humanity had endured on a death world not through brute strength alone, but through cooperation, ingenuity, and a deep respect for life, no matter how fragile or fierce it might be. And as the flames of the fire danced in the night, a new vision began to take shape. One where Turek wisdom and human adaptability could combine, not just to survive, but to build something truly remarkable. For the first time, Ivek allowed himself to imagine a future where the Turek and humans didn't just coexist. They thrived together. The days following the storm were a blur of activity. The humans and Turek worked side by side, trying to make the best of their time on Antera. McAllister's team led the way, showing the Turek how to reinforce their shelter against the next inevitable storm, how to collect and filter the scarce, acidic water, and even how to handle the local wildlife, which, much to the Turek's alarm, seemed to be attracted to the scent of food in the camp. But it was the shared moments, away from the task lists and gear, that began to change things. Slowly, Ivek and his fellow diplomats came to understand that this was more than just a demonstration of humanity's survival skills. It was a chance for true collaboration, for learning the lessons that could only be taught through experience. One evening, after the day's work was done, McAllister gathered his team and the Turek around a fire. It wasn't just a casual sit-down. It was a lesson in survival, a test of the bond that had begun to form. "I'm going to take you out into the valley tomorrow," McAllister said. "There's a nest of predator creatures near the ridge. They're dangerous, but they're also part of the ecosystem here. We need to learn how to manage them, not eliminate them." The Turek shifted uncomfortably. The idea of dealing with predators wasn't something they were familiar with. In their home world, their environment had been carefully controlled, with resources and threats managed with precise calculations. But this world was different. Antera was unpredictable, chaotic. The Turek had spent their lives avoiding danger, not facing it head-on. "You're asking us to confront these creatures?" Ivik asked, his voice steady but edged with uncertainty. McAllister nodded. "Not to fight, but to observe, to understand. These creatures are part of the balance. If we want to live here, we need to understand how they fit into it. This is a survival lesson for both of our peoples." The Turek hesitated, glancing at each other. Their instincts told them to retreat from danger, to rely on their intellect and diplomacy, not brute force or confrontation. But they could see it in McAllister's eyes, the trust he was placing in them. And they understood that the human way wasn't about domination, but respect. "We trust you, Captain," Ivek said at last. "We will go with you." The next morning, the group set out at dawn. The winds had died down, but the air was still thick with humidity. As they ventured further into the valley, the Turek observed the landscape with newfound appreciation, noticing the subtle signs of the predator's presence, the disturbed ground, the broken branches, the faint scent of sulphur in the air. As they neared the nest, McAllister paused, signalling for silence. He pointed to a large gnarled tree, where a pair of massive reptilian creatures with thick scales and sharp claws were basking in the morning sun. "Stay back," McAllister whispered. "We're not here to hunt. We're here to understand." It was in that moment, standing just beyond the reach of the predators, that the Turek saw the depth of humanity's wisdom. They weren't just learning to survive, they were learning to live with asterisk the world around them, rather than simply surviving in it. Ivik's thoughts began to shift. Perhaps the humans weren't simply conquerors, they were partners. And perhaps, together, they could teach each other how to thrive, not just survive. The test had begun, and the Turek were ready to embrace it. The days that followed the Predator encounter were filled with new challenges, but also moments of discovery. The Turek and humans had learned to adapt to each other in ways that neither could have anticipated. The Predator creatures, which had once seemed like a threat, became an object of study. McAllister's team showed the Turek how to observe their behavior, how to predict their movements based on the environment and the food sources they relied on. It wasn't about eliminating the predators, it was about understanding them as part of the natural balance of Antera. The Turek had always viewed nature through the lens of preservation, carefully managing resources to prevent overuse. But on Antera, they had learned a new lesson. The world was not something to be simply controlled, it had to be respected. McAllister's pragmatic approach, the way he spoke about the balance between predator and prey, plant and animal, had begun to resonate with them. They were discovering a different kind of harmony, one forged through resilience and understanding, not mere management. One evening, after a long day of work, Ivik approached McAllister by the fire. The sky overhead was lit with the faint glow of Antera's twin moons, casting long shadows across the rocky ground. The storm clouds had cleared, and the air was crisp and fresh. "Captain," Ivik began, his voice steady but laden with the weight of realization, "I have been thinking about what you said, the way humans survive on this world. It is not about controlling everything or fighting every threat, but understanding the world, adapting to it. There is wisdom in that." McAllister looked at him, his expression unreadable for a moment before he spoke. "You're getting it, Elder. Survival is about knowing your limits and knowing when to work with what's around you, not against it." Ivik nodded thoughtfully. "You have changed our understanding of survival. We have always prided ourselves on our ability to plan, to predict, but the unpredictability of this world, It challenges us in ways we never imagined. McAllister smiled, a rare warmth in his expression. You've got a lot of wisdom, Elder. That's what makes this work. We each bring something to the table. You've shown us how to live with peace, and we've shown you how to live with chaos. The two sat in companionable silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. The Tyrrell delegation had grown more comfortable with their environment, and their bond with the humans had deepened. They had learned not just how to survive on Antera, but how to make it their own. The mission had begun with fear, uncertainty, and suspicion. But now, as they all sat together under the starry sky, there was a quiet understanding, a new beginning. Humanity and the Turek had forged an unlikely partnership, one rooted not in dominance or fear, but in mutual respect and cooperation. Ivek looked up at the stars, a sense of hope stirring within him. Perhaps, he said softly, we can learn to live with the chaos of the universe, together. McAllister turned his gaze upward, following Ivek's line of sight. I think that's the idea, Elder. And with the right partners, maybe we can even thrive in it. For the first time, the Turek saw the galaxy not as a series of dangers to be avoided, but as a place of endless possibility, one where peace could be forged, not just in the quiet corners of the universe, but in the most chaotic of worlds. And in the heart of Antera, a new chapter had begun, one built on trust, understanding, and the shared belief that, together, they could face whatever challenges the universe would throw at them.